Time to start upgrading, maybe even side grading some gear. I've got a Triad RackAmp 300 here to unbox. So I've been using Triad speakers for a while. My original living room configuration went all the way up to a 7.2.4 system using all Triad speakers, silver LCRs, bronze surrounds, bronze sats, and bronze subs, in-walls, 2 of them. And I have been driving those subwoofers nigh on 8-ish years with a Triad RackAmp 350, an original model that included a decent amount of features. It had the Ethernet ports and the ability to access it via a web browser, set up all kinds of very involved and advanced configurations and that sort of thing. But I was never really that enamored actually with those amps. I don't feel that the web-based config actually worked very well. Kind of kludgy, kind of clunky. It wasn't getting updates. And I also felt those amps kind of had a particularly high noise floor and so on. So anyway, along the way, Triad introduced a new rack amp model. This time a 300, not a 350, so it is going down in power a little bit, but it's my living room. I don't need to drive that much bass, and I think there's a lot of virtue to making this upgrade. So I sold off my prior RackAmp 350s. I purchased a couple RackAmp 300s, the new model. Let's take a look at it. So this is just one of them, of course. I did buy 2. They make a RackAmp 700, but again, it's a living room. It's not a critical home theater zone. I don't need that much power. So the 300 will be fine. I bought 2 of them, 1 per box. So first thing we have in here, some documentation, little light on the paperwork, basic installation instructions, a couple of quick start pages, not much to that. Power cord, 2-prong, not a 3-prong, pretty common for AV gear, even amplifiers. Nothing really special about the power cord. A little thin, a little lower gauge, but this is only a 300 watt single amplifier. It doesn't need to be that beefy. They do include little rack ears, so I'm not sure whether I might actually go ahead and set this on one of my rack shelves or just mount it straight up with the little ears. It's not a full rail. These just go right on the front sides of the unit, and then it hangs and screws into the front of the rack. Pretty straightforward, but that's how the prior rack amp that I was using mounted as well. It worked fine. I'm sure this will be fine too. All right, so let's go ahead and take the amplifier itself out. Let's do it again without knocking stuff down on top of my head. Let's go ahead and take the amplifier itself out. That's it for the box. Wrapped up in a plastic bag. So here we go, some close-ups. So again, there's no web configuration on this one. There's no Ethernet port. All of the available config is done off of the dials on the front. If we take a look through them, we have a volume knob, basically a gain knob. There is some adjustment there to be able to tune the amplifier volume, amplifier power. Crossover down to 70, up to 200, as well as an LFE setting depending on how you're driving it. This is a continuous dial. It doesn't click into specific positions. Phase 0 up to 180. Power options, auto power, a manual on-off, and a 12-volt trigger. And then a product switch. So Triad makes their amps more specifically, these types of amps, the rack amps, to go with their own model of subwoofers. So there's options here for mini flex and bronze sub. So of course I have bronze I'll leave it there. This is a clicky switch, as these are more discrete selections, not a continuous selection like the other dials are. Close up of the back, we'll go over these connections. So of course we have our binding posts connecting to the subwoofer itself, trigger inputs, and a pass-through, trigger pass-through output, which is nice. Although I'm not a fan of this style of connector, I have to say. I wish this was just a 3.5mm mono trigger plug. That's far more common in receivers and preamps and other devices versus the screw terminal Phoenix connector, I think is what that's called. Yeah, so not a fan. Just means it's just more cabling hassle. I wish they would just do something a little bit more standard. RCA analog input and a pass-through output. This is a full range pass-through, so there's no control, there's no tuning, high pass or low pass filtering on these outputs. It's just a straight line output. Whatever you put in, you can cross over, of course, using the amp for what it will generate to the speaker terminals, but my understanding is that the line out is always full range in this case. There's also the same kind of screw terminal pop-on connector for speaker input if you're not using RCA line level input. And then lastly, power, a switch here for 110 versus 220, 60 hertz, 50 hertz. Obviously it's delivered in the US, it's set for 120, 60 hertz with a couple of screws and a little shield here if you needed to switch it for a different region. Manual power switch, full power switch, and then of course under the sticker, I don't like that. If you're going to put a sticker on something, don't put a sticker on that leaves residue behind. Right, make it come off clean. I gotta wipe that stuff off. But in any case, the connector for the power cord. So I'm gonna set these, both of these up probably tomorrow. I've been just running the living room without an amplifier since I sold my RackAmp 350s on eBay within the last few weeks and just got these in a couple days ago. They were sitting in the foyer waiting for an unboxing video before I set them up. On the initial setup, I'm going to be driving the living room the same way I have been. I've got the Denon X1600H receiver in there, amplifying the two left and right mains, and then these for the two subwoofers. I will be taking that Denon out, and my goal is to get the living room basically running as a complete zone 2 off of the main preamplifier that's driving my theater. The way that I use my sources and such, it just makes sense for me to do it that way. So I'm going to be buying another amp basically to replace the Denon, and I'm looking at some different options and models for that. Whatever I do end up buying, rest assured you'll see it on the channel. So that's the Triad RackAmp 300. I believe retail on this MSRP is $7.99. It looks pretty nicely made. I think this is a better looking package than the 350s. So again, to me the 350s, the older version, felt old. It didn't feel as nice. This is a much nicer looking piece of electronics. Brushed aluminum front panel, just a little more solidness to it. Nicer paint job, better chassis, better looking chassis. There you go. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. Otherwise, as usual, like and subscribe for more. I'll probably make another video maybe about the installation once I get this set up and do a little bit of a feedback and a review. So come on back. Thanks.